That is something that I want to establish early on when it comes to attack vectors. So you can view the screen in such a way that you know what your opponent is trying to control. Now, I'll give you an idea of how that comes into play in just a little bit. But before we get into that, I want to talk about distance and resources as well. Because, again, this is a very fast-paced game. And the example that I've showed you guys over here with Ryu and Cammy, I've just talked about this single distance. This is just this single distance over here. The scary thing about fighting games is that the distance changes extremely quickly. Extremely quickly. And that these areas of threat will change quickly based off of distance and ranges, and also as based on available resources as well. Again, the last episode that I did of First Attack, we talked about, spaces and how different distances between characters give one character an advantage over the other. Well, this is why. Because at certain ranges, attack vectors will be prominent and very scary, and other attack vectors will not be as scary because you've changed the distance or you've understanding the resource situation. So at any given space between each other, whose attack vectors are more threatening than the other character's attack vectors? That's who has the advantage in that situation. That's how you determine who has an advantage. And that's one of the key things. I talked so much about having an advantage and a disadvantage and using the Ryu Guile matchup. I was able to explain to you why, and the mind games that, at this distance, Ryu can whiff punish the crouching medium kick. At this distance, Guile can jump over and not hit a button, and that kind of was me giving you the idea of attack vectors before I explained to you what attack vectors are. So let's go back now to our examples over here. And we have this close-up situation. I'm going to flip this now, okay? Obviously, at this range, Cammy has the advantage because she's got a lot better buttons than Ryu. Ryu has a fireball, which can work at this range very, very well. But Cammy, the EX dive kick will blow up the fireball. She has a EX drill that can go through fireballs up close, and she kind of controls this space a little bit in general. But if we now move to a situation where Ryu and Cammy are a full screen away, you're going to see here that Ryu actually is a lot safer here. Because in this previous example here, we have these awesome attack vectors from Cammy, but at far range now, those attack vectors don't do anything for Cammy. Because where are they attacking? They're attacking here. There's nothing here. So standing medium kick, crouching medium kick, and dive kick are not going to do me anything because Ryu is way over here. Like, what is this going to do for me? Nothing. This is not going to do me anything. So these attack vectors now become irrelevant. And in fact, Ryu has a great attack vector in the Hadouken. You can see this. Look at this. The projectile goes clear across the screen. It covers that whole space and it won't go away. It has a limitless attack vector. It just keeps going until it leaves the screen. And so this is what makes projectiles really powerful. It's an attack vector that has no distance restriction, and it just controls all this space in front of Ryu. So if I were to draw both of the attack vectors at the same time, it would cover that whole entire row in front of Ryu. This is why projectiles in general are such a powerful tool. Now, of course, games can easily come up with ways to weaken projectiles. That's what we've seen here in Street Fighter V. There are so many ways for characters to deal with projectiles, so it's not as powerful as it was before, but they have to specifically build in abilities for characters to deal with projectiles. Had they not given those characters the ability to deal with projectiles, like for example, if they didn't give Bison the ability to use his V skill to grab a fireball out of the air and throw it back at the opponent, he would have a hard time dealing with this, as he has in every previous game. That's why Bison has always had troubles with projectiles, is because by default, by fundamental idea, a projectile is one of the most powerful tools because it controls that part of the screen. And as a character, you lose this entire portion of the screen because Ryu's attack vector takes up that whole entire space. Now, all of you guys are going to be saying, hey, but wait, Cammy, she has one of those. She has the EX drill. So she has a way to deal with fireballs. So I can EX drill right through a projectile, right? And you can see right here, Cammy's just going to go right through a projectile. No problem. Too easy, right? No, that's not the case. Because here at the full screen distance here, if Cammy EX drills a fireball, guess what? It doesn't reach him. It whiffs. It stops. In other words, the attack vector of the EX drill does not go far enough to actually hit Ryu. Ryu is just going to stand here and be like, hey, what's up, Cammy? And then basically combo her to death and destroy her. So at this range, the EX drill is not a threat. It's not an attack vector. It's something she can do, but that attack vector literally doesn't exist. And even if I move them slightly closer, you can barely tell. The screen is zooming in slightly, but I am moving them slightly closer. Just by moving them in that much closer, the EX drill connects. And now this attack vector exists. Now, as the Ryu player, this is an attack vector you have to be aware of. So what do? Well, the easy answer is you try to build that distance again. You try to back off so you can throw a fireball so that the drill will whiff. And so at this slight close range here, this attack vector exists, but as soon as you back up a little bit, this attack vector completely disappears. Again, showing you guys examples of how almost instantaneously on how the spacing between characters changes the attack vectors. And by understanding last episode and this episode, now you'll see why the spacing changes advantages and how quickly this happens. Because your opponent, as much as you walk backwards, again, this is a two-player game, if you try to build this full screen distance, Cammy's going to walk forward, and it doesn't take her that long to walk into range where the EX drill becomes a threat. And so you're going to be fighting for these positions and understanding how to take advantage and understanding this, take advantage of distances by understanding what your opponent's attack vectors are. So let's go back here to the slideshow. Now, one of the most important things about the way attack vectors work is that you can use these to plan your defense. We've been talking about footsies a lot. We've been talking about how to make, get in on the opponent, how to attack them. We haven't talked much about defense yet. And although I'll have a whole episode on defense, on some of the important things about defense, attack vectors are going to really help you understand how to play defense in neutral, and how to take advantage of your opponent's blind spots, as we saw in the Link versus Ball and Chain dudes example. So a character like Cammy, for example, we saw the attack vectors of the stand medium kick, crouch medium kick, and dive kick. She has a clear blind spot in there that we'll see in just a little bit. But keep in mind that you don't want to abuse blind spots, because the more often you abuse a blind spot, you're basically turning that into an attack vector of your own. Again, your opponent is assessing your attack vectors all the time. And if you abuse a blind spot, it becomes an attack vector for you. And so now your opponent is going to be assessing your attack vector and how to stop that as well. Again, we'll get into a visual example of this. And so one of the things that's really convenient is finding a single solution for multiple attack vectors. If you know that this is a different way. So one way to use defense is to find the blind spot on an attack vector. A second way is finding a single solution for multiple attack vectors. If the opponent has all these different ways to attack you, what better way to stop it than to have one option defeat all of those options? Another example is anticipation of attack vectors. Again, that is their area of threat. In other words, that is what they want to do the most. It is a great attack for them to use because it has such a good attack vector for that for that distance, for that range, for the resources. So what you can do is you can purposely put yourself into the precise range of your opponent's attack vector so that they will try to use that move because you have something all ready for them to defeat them. Yeah, so exactly. Put yourself intentionally in danger to bait the opponent. So let's talk about these one by one. Look for blind spots in attack vectors. Let's talk about finding single solutions and anticipation of attack vectors. So let's go back to our examples over here. And let's go back to the original example that I had over here. I want you to notice one thing about the attack vectors that Cammy has. The EX dive kick attacks down here, okay? Standing medium kick attacks here, and crouching light kick attacks here. All of these attack vectors are attacking in basically one specific area over here. So I've drawn this circle over here on top of Ryu now. So as you can see, all of my attacks in general are hitting this area for Ryu. So what ends up happening is that there is a blind spot up here above Ryu because none of Cammy's attacks are actually attacking that. So what you find out is that if you neutral jump, all those attack vectors, in fact, the crouching medium kick attack vector is off of the screen. You've scrolled it off the screen. It's completely out of play. And if Cammy jumps an EX dive kick, she will land here under you where you can potentially kick her and she's recovering. The standing medium kick will kick over here, and if she hits the button, you can kick her on the way down from your neutral jump. In other words, you have a blind spot up here, and this is why the neutral jump works so well against Cammy players who are a little too feverishly trying to attack you. In fact, if the Cammy even tries to dash forward and use that as an attack vector, use her movement as an attack vector, this also beats that as well. What you'll see a lot of times that this tactic works particularly well against M. Bison, against a character like Balrog, aka Boxer, because all of their attack vectors come straight at you. Most of their attack vectors and their biggest threats in neutral are all straightforward, whether it's a dash punch from Boxer, or it's the Psycho Axe from M. Bison, or the Scissor Kick from M. Bison. They all have this blind spot up here. The problem now is that if I abuse this, as I mentioned in the slide, if I abuse this, I have turned this into my attack vector. Ryu now has an attack vector going diagonally down here, and because this is a two-player game, your opponent is going to, if they're a good player, pick up on neutral jumps a lot, and that becomes an attack vector. And because now that is an area of threat, they are going to stand at a range in which you want to neutral jump to occupy this blind spot, and all Cammy's gonna do is take half a step and uppercut you. She has basically turned your attack vector into your weakness. So you can't abuse this. If you pepper in a neutral jump every once in a while, you may catch her off guard. But if you start neutral jumping like a rabbit, then your opponent is going to recognize it as an attack vector threat, because normally while you're standing here, that's not something Cammy's thinking about. She's thinking about Ryu's crouching medium kick, his standing light kick, his standing medium kick, the fireball, the EX fireball. Those are the attack vectors she's worried about. She's not thinking about neutral jump, which is why the neutral jump can come as a surprise against Cammy and throw them off. But if you abuse this too much, it becomes a common attack vector. Cammy is going to have it in mind. So the next time you neutral jump, she's going to take half a step and uppercut you out of the air. And so there you go, have a great example of how you can try to play this on defense as Ryu. You will take advantage of the blind spots. Or, you know, if you neutral jump a bunch of times, now what you're trying to do is make the Kami think about this blind spot, and then you stop neutral jumping, because now the Kami realizes, oh, hey, you know what? I'm not going to try to use any of these areas of attack because he keeps neutral jumping. I'm going to try to walk in and uppercut him. So now she's not going to attack in this area. So now as Ryu, you can take advantage of this space. This, all of a sudden, no longer becomes a threat because she's so focused on trying to stop your neutral jump. So you neutral jump a bunch of times to put it in her brain. So now you have removed this threat because that's what she's focusing on. That's what she's concentrating on. So again, as a two-player game, you are constantly evolving what it is that you are trying to do and trying to keep your opponent on their toes. All right. Let's talk about another example here, and this one's going to be a little bit easier with the interactive ability of this. Let's talk about Dragon Ball FighterZ here, okay? Because it's time to spread into a few other games, and I want to talk about Dragon Ball FighterZ because Dragon Ball FighterZ is very unique when it comes to attack vectors because there are no blind spots in Dragon Ball FighterZ attack vector. Why are there no blind spots? Because of this move right here. This is the super dash. This is an automatic move that hones in on the opponent no matter where I am. I can be up here and I come diagonally down and attack him. I can be right above his head and I will come straight down and attack him. So in other words, I have this attack that literally will go straight at the enemy and hone in on them. There are no blind spots. In fact, what makes it even crazier is I have this move called the Vanish, which for a bar, if I have 1 meter, I will disappear, and no matter where my opponent is, I will show up right next to him and kick him. So at any given time, I can super dash at you no matter where I am, and I can vanish at you no matter where you are. And again, even if he's jumping up here and I super dash, I'll come up after you. So in other words, there are 0 blind spots in Dragon Ball FighterZ. So isn't this a problem then? Doesn't this make it so that there's like, okay, so these tools are too powerful. It's too strong. It's too strong. No, it's not. Because I will go back to something that I talked about before. And that is having a single solution for multiple situations. Here we have this situation here with Frieza, right? So he has the ability to super dash at you from the ground, okay? If he's jumping, he can super dash at you from the air. If he's above you, you know what? He'll super dash straight down at you and hit you anyway. And no matter what, if you guys are standing there, he can always vanish and hit you no matter what. I'm just going to draw Frieza in all these locations over here. At any given time, he can attack you at exactly the attack vector that he needs. And Super Dash, for the most part, is designed to always reach you. So distance and positions aren't a problem. So how in the heck do you handle this kind of situation where there's no blind spots and the opponent can just attack you at any given time? The answer to that question is 2H, or crouching heavy attack. Because crouching heavy attack cannot be hit by airborne opponents. And if you notice something over here on the capture screen over here, if I do the super dash, I go up into the air. I am in the air. If I vanish, I am in the air. Which means that if I try to super dash, 2H will beat it every single time. So that the way this game was designed is that it doesn't matter that these attack vectors can attack you from every single angle. It doesn't matter because 2H can blow it up every single time. It doesn't matter which super dash they come, I will 2H it. If he vanishes it, guess what? 2H, crouching H, down H, doesn't care what side you're on. It'll turn around for you, and it'll punch the vanish on the other side. So there you go. So if you super dash, I'm going to punch you from one side. If you vanish, I'll punch you from the other side because I can't get hit. So while this game created the situation where the attack vectors are so powerful, they also gave you one answer to all of these attack vectors. So in other words, you don't have to sit there and think about how do I deal with this attack vector, this attack vector, this attack. You just have crouching heavy attack in your brain at any given moment. And as soon as you see them super dash, oh, crouching heavy. As soon as you see them vanish, oh, crouching heavy. You have a singular way to defeat all of these attack vectors every single time. So you only need to keep that one thing in your brain. Now, I'm going to throw a loop in here, and this is what happens when you play games with assists. You're going to wonder, well, if that's the case, then what's the point of Vanish? And what's the point of Super Dash? Then they're useless if you can 2H it every single time, right? Well, no, the problem is this, right? And I'm blocking him a little bit, but, Cell, he's just came in here and just shot me. So not only is the player playing Frieza gonna try to be as unpredictable as possible, this game has assists. And you always have to worry about assists. And so while you're sitting here thinking to yourself, oh, no problem, I can just 2H everything that he does. If he comes at me, pow, no problem. Well, you have to worry about this. So in other words, while you're standing here with all these attack vectors, there's also this attack vector that you always have to have in your brain. This is something that you always have to have in your mind. I did talk a little bit about resources, however, so this will make a difference because now you can think about cooldown. You can think about a situation where Cell is not available. So now that attack vector disappears. Or maybe you've defeated Cell and he's no longer around. So this attack vector completely goes away. But because those attack vectors exist, it throws in the loop again for being able to just crouching heavy attack everything that the opponent tries to do to get in on you. Again, remember, fighting games are a two-player game. And one of the reasons why I say that is not only because your opponent's always trying to adapt, but because if they design the game properly, there always has to be a counter to a solution. If there is never a counter to a solution, then you have a bad fighting game and something is overpowered. But if you have a counter to a solution that counters a different solution, that counters a different solution, that counters a different, that is how you have a properly created fighting game. So in this situation, while crouching heavy will beat all these options, by having assists and locking you down, they force you to block, and then they can get in with a lot of different abilities. Or, for example, they can vanish to punish you for trying to do an attack. There's always a way to make these things work. And again, if there isn't a way to make these things work, then it is an absolutely useless tool. And there's one more example over here, and what I want to show you is Kazumi versus Claudio in Tekken. We all, for those of you who are familiar with Tekken, we all know what one of Claudio's most dangerous moves is. And that is, of course, Claudio's hop kick. I mean, look at this thing. I mean, he kicks at a circle, but this thing covers everything. This covers like this entire space in front. There's practically not even an attack vector. It just hits in this whole entire space. It just controls this entire space. So this is kind of annoying for Kazumi. So what you want to do a lot of times in Tekken is you want to try to bait these powerful tools. So what you're going to do as Kazumi, and this is the reason why in Tekken movement is so crucial, is because you need to bait people to using these super powerful moves. So what you want to do is you want to try to back away from Claudio a little bit so that he can whiff his hop kick and then you can punish him. Now, again, that's kind of hard. That's just by nature of Claudio. Even when he whiffs his hop kick, it's really hard to punish, which is why it's a really powerful tool. So what happens a lot of the times is you actually end up playing a little bit further range from Claudio because he is so scary when he's up close with that hop kick, and you don't even want to put yourself at a range where he can dash and hop kick very easily. You kind of want to stay away from him, assess his movement, try to figure out what he's doing, use all the things we talked about in the last episode to try to assess what he's doing. Try to figure out his play pattern, if he's aggressive, if he's, very defensive, if he's careful, if he's reckless, and then that way you can find the ability to come in and attack him. The problem, though, is by going at this range, you are opening yourself up to Claudio's running 2. This is an amazing move for Claudio because it covers so much distance. No lie, I did running 2 from here, and she had to block it from there. So I just ran, moved about this far, started the move, and it flew far enough that Kazumi was forced to block it even at this range over here. So in other words, Claudio has this amazing attack vector over here. So even putting yourself at this full range, you're still at a threat from Claudio's running 2. This is a problem. And so what are you supposed to do now? Well, if you look carefully at this attack vector, there's a giant hole under it. I purposely put it as high up as possible because what it actually turns out is that you can crouch under Claudio's running 2. This is a high attack. And in Tekken, high attacks can be crouched under. They can be high crushed. And by crouching, you just watch this thing whiff over your head and you can kill him. You can blow him up. So, even though it has this amazing attack vector and Claudio's will want to use this move, by standing at this range, by putting yourself intentionally at the optimal range of his running 2 for that move to be effective, you can bait him into using it and expect it and crouch under it and punish the hell out of him. Because it has a lot of recovery and now you can blow him up. Because if you block it, if you block this move, Claudio still has the mix-up. You actually end up going into a stagger. You can see Kazumi falling back so far. So even though I'm blocking it, this is still not optimal because after I block this move, Claudio still can apply pressure on me because you end up staggering and you can't move before Claudio can. So he actually can apply the pressure. So blocking this is not an option. And so Claudios know this, so they want to use this move at this range. And so what do you do? You give them that range. You give them that attack vector so that they use it and then you can crouch under and punish them. Baiting the opponent by putting them into the right attack vector is very, very important. So that is another example of what you can do on defense